Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 355, our two-part Green Lantern catch-up. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and on this episode, I'm joined by longtime friend of the show from the blog and podcast of OA, Myron Rumsey, and also longtime friend of the show, Jamie Dunst, as we take a two-part look at the Green Lantern universe. This first part focuses on the ending of the Wrath of the First Lantern and the wrap-up of the run of Geoff Johns. We're going to be focusing very heavily on Green Lantern issue number 20, which was epic. And then the second part is going to focus on Green Lantern 21, Green Lantern Corps 21, and Green Lantern New Guardians number 21 as we take a look at the new creative teams and the new direction that those books are going in. As always, we are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, if you are a Green Lantern fan and you aren't shopping at DCBService.com, just get an idea of the kind of savings you would get. Green Lantern number 23, Robert Venditti, Billy Tan, the whole creative team. It's $2.99 regularly. It's 40% off, only $179. If you're getting all of the books, you're getting that discount on New Guardians, Green Lantern Corps, Red Lanterns, and, of course, Larfleeze. So, I mean, this is a great opportunity to save some money on the Green Lantern universe, especially if you're buying all the titles, and there's really a reason to do that. So take a look over there. Plus, they offer those combo packs, and they have hardcovers, the Green Lantern hardcover, Volume 3, The End. It's $24.99 regularly, 50% off, only $12.49. So DCBService.com is really your pre-order source, and if you aren't doing your shopping there, please consider helping out our show sponsor and checking it out. Remember, they are also a Comixology and iVerse Media digital partner, and what that means is, if you connect your digital accounts, you are going to be earning credit from every digital purchase, and I love doing this, towards purchases from DCBService.com. It's 5% of each of those purchases. Doesn't cost you anything more to do that, but you're helping out a show sponsor, so please consider linking your account there, especially if you do lots of digital purchases. Over at our sponsor, InStockTrades.com, I loved the Before Watchmen series, and they have the Before Watchmen hardcovers available, especially right now. They've got them at this amazing 50% off discount. These books are $29.99 regularly. That takes them down to $15. For example, I'm looking right now at the Minutemen and Silk Spectre one. And this is a 288-page book that's available at that price point. So be sure to be checking out InStockTrades.com regularly, because they do all the time these deals of the month, the deals of the week, and it's a great opportunity for you to stock up on books that you've missed at a price point that allows you to read more, which we're all looking for. So I want to thank DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com for supporting our show. Oh, James, just what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean, Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're going to be discussing on today's show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Joining us for this very special Green Lantern chat is longtime friend of the show, Jamie Dunst, and once again joining us from the blog of OA and podcast of OA, the great Myron Rumsey. Guys, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Thanks, Sean.
Hey, Sean, it's great to be back. And Jamie, it's great to be talking with you.
You as well, Myron.
We're going to start off first by talking about the amazingly cool Green Lantern number 20, this oversized anniversary issue. And Geoff Johns did the writing, and there's like a plethora of artists that, like, to list them, we'd probably spend about 20 minutes. It's just an amazing group, a talented group that worked on this, because did you guys, let's actually start talking about that first. With the fact that we had the shifting art throughout this, like, I found that there was a really nice flow to this issue. With the size of it and the fact that they had to bring in so much talent, I never found that jarring to my experience. I think they did just a really great job of kind of meshing and keeping the same flow and feel throughout the story. Did you guys have that experience, though? And Jamie, let's start with you. Where were you at on that?
I mean, I've read this about 6 times since I've gotten it, and, you know, looking at it from different angles, and I really never noticed. I mean, I've noticed at some point that the art style changed a little bit, but it seemed to fit within the story pretty well, and I was just overly very impressed with the art styles overall. I thought it was really good.
Myron, what about you?
I thought they did a really good job of when they did shift artists. Either it was so subtle you really didn't notice. They did a good job of matching artists up, or when it was a little bit less subtle, it was because it was a natural break in the story, so it made sense either in flashback or they were showing something different. So yeah, I thought they did an excellent job.
I liked how the story began. Like, I didn't know how they were going to do this, and we got this opening with Lantern Snow, the story of Hal Jordan. And I didn't expect it to begin with all that. I liked that because, to me, this issue, and what was really important to me as a reader who's read this since the beginning, and I know you guys have got to be in this same emotional spot, this was like bittersweet because I've loved this run. I've loved Jeff Johns. I've loved the whole creative team on all of the books. I think they've just done an amazing job of delivering a very large experience. This felt like, from the beginning to the end, in one issue, they managed to bookend all of the right memory beats by giving us, like, the Hal story. It kind of told us what is in the New 52, and I thought that was kind of cool, too. It just summed kind of everything up and gave me a great sense of closure. And I didn't expect so much of that to be at the beginning of the issue. What did you guys think about the opening of this and just the idea of using the story of Hal Jordan as, like, a framing point?
Well, I thought... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Myron.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought it was smart for a couple of reasons. One, for longtime readers, it reminded us of the journey we've been on with Jeff Johns all the way through this historic run. And then for a lot of people, I think a lot of people that maybe didn't read the book picked this up because it was a special event. And it gave them an idea of what's gone on and what they might have missed. So I thought it was kind of smart for a couple different reasons.
Yeah, and I gotta agree with that. I mean, when I picked it up and I started reading it and just seeing the backstory that they gave for going like all the way back to Rebirth to where we currently were, it was very smart in that, you know, for someone who hasn't read Green Lantern but knew this was a big deal, they could get caught up in a couple pages. And I love the summary of everything that came before it, and it was done so well that it only took couple of pages to do, so you can get caught up and then get right into the action. And as for longtime readers, you get that sense of journey on how long it's been, and it really kind of brought back some memories of older things I've read, and I liked the new images of showing that past. So it was a nice way to start the issue.
I would also say for that reader who's like maybe jumped on board with the New 52. You know, the issue ones, they were grabbing on them. This would give them, I think, a good idea of what stories they should go back and read. You know, if they're like, wow, I've been really enjoying this for like 20 issues now, and I just want to, you know, where do I get my feet wet in all this? And I thought, you know, sometimes in just like a quick couple pages, it'll say, hey, you want to go reread these beats, so that way you know what's going on.
Yeah, and then there's the additional payoff of what happens at the end, and when you find out the identity of one of these individuals, there's just a bigger payoff there. So it wasn't just done for exposition purposes. There really was a story-driven reason for it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. And then also, you know, you have it in the back where it shows all the different like trades. You know, there's like a checklist of things you can get to kind of go back and say, oh, I like this stuff. Where can I go and go read further? So it goes even back to Rebirth, which is like the first trade I see on here. And yeah, it definitely, to me, this was like the perfect issue. I mean, it just had a nice start with a recap, and this went right through, and it was really just well-told storytelling. You know,
let's not dance around who the storyteller is, Sinestro, because, Myron, you were going there, and I think we should just talk about it. Yeah. I think Sinestro was one of those characters. He was so pivotal to the New 52 run and what they've been doing with this character, and I like the duality of Sinestro. He's a very complicated person. Is he a hero? Is he a villain? Is he something in the middle? He's very hard to pin down. And I think in this story, it's arguable that like he was like a tennis ball as far as how you would view him. And I really loved that because I do feel there's moments of times where I look at him as one of the most vile villains. But then there's other moments where it's like, wow, he might be the most heroic guy in the issue. And he had those moments here where he does things that like are so clearly outside of his comfort level, or what we would think would be his comfort level. And we're like, wow, that's really noble. And it comes from, at his core, what he believes is important. And he's a very passionate individual, a very passionate man. And there's something about that I find engaging. He is a villain that I think is very unique to DC, and I think characters like this are really critical to drive readers to comics. I think when you've got characters that are villains that are... You can see them being a good guy from time to time for like various reasons because of their ego. He works in kind of in a way that Lex Luthor does, but I don't want to like make it seem like I consider them clones because they're so vastly different. But there are certain elements about him that I do see from time to time in Luthor, and ego-driven a lot of times is where I think that they work. But what do you guys think about Sinestro and his handling in this issue? He was this like secret guide through all this, but also just kind of his role in the thing overall. Myron, let's start with you.
Well, it's interesting because throughout Jeff Johns' run, he's taken Sinestro, who used to be kind of the traditional mustache-twirling villain, and he's added so much complexity and character to him that he's like you said, he's really an outstanding character in the DC universe. He's kind of the Green Lantern Magneto character, for lack of a better analogy. And what I loved in particular about how he put Sinestro in this issue is, as you said, Sinestro is very ego-driven, and when you get to the end of the story and you find out that Sinestro is the librarian with the Book of Oa, and he's burned his own pages away, and this is all about Hal because Hal was the greatest Green Lantern. When you bookend that to where Sinestro was in Rebirth, boy, what character growth and change,
For me, yeah, I agree. I mean, I've always liked Sinestro, and he was one of those characters that DC, he was like the dark mirror image of the hero, like where you have Flash and Reverse Flash or Captain Marvel and Black Adam. I always saw, Sinestro in that sort of aspect. But with Jeff, he really made, him a sympathetic character to the point where you can see why Sinestro does what he wants. He does. He wants order in the same way that the Guardians wanted order, but he saw it coming through different ways. And it took me I think the third time reading it through before I realized that it was Sinestro telling the story, and then I read it again and it gave me a whole different perspective on the storytelling. And it's interesting because then he talks about the other Green Lanterns, and you see that he has a different opinion of those characters than he did previously, and it makes it for a very interesting read when you realize who's telling the story.
I think it's really interesting too when you take a look at the way that the story starts to unfold after kind of the recap, when you see Hal laying there dead and you see Sinestro re-embracing fear. These are two that, like, everything they were doing before was not working. They'd been duped, and they were at a point where they realized in order to stand any chance of defeating Volthoom and surviving all this, they, and for very different motivational reasons, the two of them resort to very desperate measures. Hal in killing himself and becoming a Black Lantern, and Sinestro re-embracing fear for the purpose. Do you think all along Sinestro had the intention of using Parallax as his trump card?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at the pages, and at first, when I first read this, I thought he took off the ring as a way. I thought he was trying to end it all. To be honest, it looked like he was such in mourning over Beauregard that he just rips the ring off. But I guess he was making sure that the ring would go on to him. But it looks like he's about to like suffocate because he takes off the ring and then he doesn't have the protection of the ring anymore in deep space. I mean, I don't know what you guys thought.
I don't know if his end goal was to bond with Parallax again. What I thought was particularly neat, especially from an artistic standpoint, is the scene in which Sinestro takes his ring off and Hal is dying. Is they do mirror each other. They're very parallel yet very opposite at the same time. I think Sinestro chose to do the bonding with Parallax when he saw that Hal wasn't going to be able to cut it. In that incident, it's funny when that happened, when you see Sinestro fly away near the end of the issue and he flies away to go merge with Parallax, a part of me thought he was just flying away to get away. And then it was like suddenly I realized it's the friendship that he has with Hal that I don't want to say unrequited because it doesn't sound quite right, but it's that friendship that's on a hinge. It's a hinge between friendship and foe. depending on the situation. And in this situation, he was coming to everybody's rescue. Yeah, and I think he realized he had to go down the wrong road for everybody else's sake.
I don't know that I took it that Sinestro was trying to kill himself there. The only thing I did say, though, when he took that off, I'm with you, Jamie, that moment was very pronounced because he's in the middle of space. So, he's making that choice to take off the ring. And I think, from the previous issue, I think the whole purpose of him going there was to seek out, the power of fear again and to embrace it. But that the risk factor of doing that, because the way he unleashes the ring, you're right, he's doing like an all or nothing. I guess with his experience, he would know that the ring would re-embrace him. I guess if it were me, I don't know that I would have that kind of trust to let the other ring go.
Right. Because you can see like in the bottom panel, he's really using a lot of exertion to rip that ring off his finger. You can almost think. I'm almost afraid that he could rip off his finger while doing it because he looks like he's using so much force. But I love these two pages because it feels almost cinematic to me in the back and forth between Hal and Sinestro, and it's really well done.
One of the things that I think has been a hallmark of this run, and I'm going back to before the New 52, that issue with Ollie, where Ollie had the ring on, Ollie had to generate an arrow, just a single arrow, and the amount of exertion that went into that always stood out for me as being, I thought, a great way to illustrate the sheer amount of willpower that really goes into what these lanterns do. And when you see Sinestro taking off that ring, it does show you that the relationship between the wearer and the ring is a very powerful symbiotic relationship. And I like that. It makes it more than just a piece of jewelry that can be easily removed. It adds some depth that, if somebody can actually take a ring off of a lantern for any reason, there is a major power there that's being done. And I like that because this thing is being branded as the most powerful weapon in the galaxy or the universe, however you want to, look at that. If you're going to say it's that, there really should be something to the relationship between the ring and the person, the power that the person has to be able to exert in order to, ignite that to get that thing going. It just added something to me in that moment to see. It's funny how a simple thing like him taking off the ring, but there being so much effort involved, meant something to me. But it did because I think it just adds to that relationship.
I think you're right, Sean. One of the common misperceptions, or at least what you see a lot from the general public, is that it's a ring you can just take on and off, and it doesn't really require anything. Anybody could put it on and use it. And I like that's one of the things that Jeff kind of added to this whole mythology, that there's more to it than just putting a piece of jewelry on your finger.
Yeah, for me, one of the things I never really bought into earlier on, like in other series, was how easily other people could just take the ring and use it. I remember, I think specifically in the third series of Green Lantern, issue number 2, where these two guys took Hal and Guy's ring and started using it without any problems, and that always bothered me for some reason. So I like this new kind of aspect of it where it takes a lot of effort to use the ring and to even take off the ring. And so, yeah, I thought that whole part of it was really good.
What did you guys think about Volthoom as a character? One of the things that I really liked about this story was the idea that Volthoom was a newer character, but there's a history to him. I liked that idea that Volthoom is actually one of the oldest characters in the story. He's up there with the Guardians. He predates all of the Lanterns, yet he's something that we never knew anything about. What did you guys think of this character? Is it a character that at some point in time, with how wacky comics work, that you would like to see come back again? And just what did you think of him as use in this story?
I thought he was good. I like the added mythology that Jeff is bringing to the whole Green Lantern franchise, and this is just one more character that he's created and developed and makes something interesting. There's always got to be a first lantern and a first ring and someone who was tried to wield it. And so this character who can seemingly control all of the emotional spectrum powers seemed like an interesting character. I don't think every issue dealt with him as well as like the Green Lantern issues, but overall, I really like the character. And if sometime down the line they feel like they could do a story with him again coming back, I'd love it.
It's interesting. I think Volthoom was a little different than what people expected him to be because he was a far more intellectual enemy than a physical threat. And I think for some people they had a hard time with that. But I really enjoyed how Volthoom explored the history of all the characters, and we got to know more about them and what drives them in a way that you normally wouldn't get from an adversary. I'm also wondering, because of the sheer nature of the name of the character, if Volthoom is going to become the new 52 Volthoom that's connected with Power Ring and the Crime Syndicate.
I know you mentioned that in a previous conversation we had. I'd be interesting to see if that is.
Yeah, I remember you had discussed that on your podcast, and I thought that was an interesting concept as well. And it would be interesting just to see him come, back, at some point if they had a good story for him. But I like the idea that they showed, not just potential futures for these characters, that they did, they went left instead of right. I thought it was it was an interesting way to show origins for characters that seem the same but a little different, especially with like Guy's background and even a little bit more with Kyle. We get a little more with Kyle's background for this new 52 as opposed to what he was originally like in the previous universe. It was an interesting way to get to know these characters better than we did when all the series first started.
Jeff Johns has become really good at doing this. He did these with this when he was doing like those experimental secret origin stories, where he would tell a story in the past of the character that would give us kind of a fresh origin, but it would add something deep that would have a major storytelling effect. And you're right. This story, one of the great things I liked about it is it served as a great conclusion to what has been going on with the Johns and Tomasi and Bedard and really everybody. There's so many names that we really should be shouting out when we're talking about that. Everybody who's been associated with this since Rebirth should really be commended. But one of the things that I liked here is it kind of set us in a tone of like, this is what still exists in the New 52. And I like finding out this way. This is my preference. I'm a sucker for origin stories. I got no problem like that. I'm loving what they're doing in Batman right now with Scott Snyder telling an origin story of Batman over there. And I like that. It's cool. So I'm not against that. I'm into that kind of stuff. But I also don't want to see that happening in every single book in the line. So I'm a fan of when you're saying, okay, hey, if Batman's doing this over here, what about if we've got this really cool Green Lantern story where we can use this character who is more cerebral to kind of jump back into this character's past and tell us what happened, like how he got here and what his potential futures and potential past could be. I love that.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting concept because it showed us what could have been for the characters if they did something differently. But more importantly, we got to see what they were like in the past. So you kind of get as much as I like the Zero issues where they kind of gave you a glimpse at what they were like beforehand. This kind of meshed well with the story, so it was an interesting thing to see.
Well, I thought it was interesting too because we saw what the decisions these characters made in their lives, how it made them who they are today. I kind of looked at a lot of those issues as a DC version of the old What If books that Marvel used to do.
Yes.
Where, what if this character did this and what if that character did that? And I thought those were really kind of neat. It's a neat way to explore a character, not by necessarily telling you everything they did before, but how pivotal moments of their lives shaped who they become.
It worked on a lot of levels, which I think that makes a far more interesting story. I think we got the information that we've been wanting all along about what their background really is, while at the same time, I like your analogy of the What If because it did have that feel to it. I want to talk about the Guardians, and specifically the traditional Guardians that we've known and grown to hate because they've become sort of the enemies of the story, to these lost Guardians that we've seen that have come back who have their emotions intact. And it's interesting to see these two sets of Guardians really framing through Volthoom what the Guardians did when they divorced themselves from emotions and how they just, we knew about the Manhunters. Now we find out about Volthoom. It's like one thing after another in the past of the Guardians, where there was a time where they looked very noble and kind of above, almost godlike in the way that they were kind of above all of us. And while you could see why like a Guy Gardner would argue with them, for example, or a Hal Jordan would sometimes not agree with their decision because they saw everything black and white, you still felt that they were coming at it from a noble purpose. But when you find out about these deep-rooted secrets that were behind the scenes of what they were doing, how far they would go to preserve order, it really just made sense. Like, I love that they weren't just randomly dropped into the quote-unquote villain role for no reason. I like that there was, when you look back and you say, wow, this really fits who these characters have been all along, that shows a writer and a writing team who really understands from the beginning what these characters were all about and how you could play with those tools, those toys, in a way that shows us something that we never saw before, a different camera angle.
I agree. I mean, it's a way to keep. I mean, for one thing, it's a way to keep stories fresh, is to be able to add something that's already there. And the Guardians for a long time just looked like this holier than thou entities that were doing things that they felt were for the greater good, but in reality were just messing things up even more. And to see, get these revelations about what happened in the past was really it. I didn't want them to just be like they were being controlled or they were being or something like that, but what happens in this story, it makes it believable, I guess. I mean, it was more interesting than other theories I've had.
Yeah, the Guardians were originally these very altruistic beings that were trying to make up for the evil that they had inadvertently released into the universe. And it's interesting to see how over time they kind of grew and matured, and then they got to a point where they kind of went overboard. And one of the interesting analogies I found in the epilogue issue of Green Lantern New Guardians was when St. Walker was talking to Kyle about Kyle's father and how, as a child you put your parents on a pedestal, but really they're no less human than we are. And I think when you look at the Guardians, I think all along fans and the Green Lanterns put the Guardians on a pedestal, but they were just as capable as failing as anybody else was. And in the end, their choice to give up their emotions is what undermined them and what was ultimately their failure.
Agreed. I mean, and I think the fact that they couldn't see the fallacy in what they were doing made it even more so when they finally, get those emotions back, that, they are finally looking at themselves, in the light they should have been looking at themselves in the first place.
It's a very tragic end.
I like the idea that the Corps has evolved to the point where they could see the Guardians for what they were. Like you've had some Corps members that are your veterans that really started to see things for what they were. And it was only when they all were able to find a way to kind of come together and evaluate and, meet up with just a lot. I mean, this run-in when Volthoom is like, doing his, he's grabbed his ring back and everything like that from Ganthet. I don't know what you call that exactly, the way that he took that, but and why Ganthet would keep the ring there. But
I call it kind of gross.
Yeah. But I love when like Guy comes in, because at that point I was really ready to see, let's get some action going here. And the pacing of this is something that I thought was really, really great. Like when I was ready for it, it was there for me. And you see the whole team come in. I love Fatality kind of standing out back there too, because there's a character that's had a major evolution in her storyline, especially her and John being together. Like, who saw that coming? Arisia, just Kilowog, and, the newer Lanterns that have come along the way. Just, it's such a great cast of characters that we've gotten to know over this entire run. I mean, sure, going back even before Rebirth, we knew all of these characters. But it's amazing, just from Rebirth to now, how much character development there's been. There's very few series that you can make a nod to, except maybe like Legion of Superheroes, where you're dealing with this kind of cast that is so well known that, like, we know backstories of so many of these characters. We know tales of adventure from so many of these characters and how they interact with each other. It's really an amazing feat, because I felt like they've given so many characters really cool screen time, and that's the advantage of having a line where you've got more than one book, because you can have different focuses in each of those titles. And I think it's the reason why when you see this kind of battle, the scope and scale of what these creators have done and character development alone has been staggering.
Well, I definitely agree with the amount of characters and you know, the evolution of the characters to the point where you care for all those characters. Like Fatality, for me, you know, I remember when she first appeared as the Green Lantern killer, and then she evolved into a Sinestro Corps member, and then going into the Star Sapphires. For me, these characters feel like characters you would see in Star Trek. Like, you care about the characters in Star Trek, from like a Captain Kirk to like a Reginald Barclay. You know, you see these supporting characters, and they become, you know, they have such good moments that you begin to care about the smaller characters as much as, or even more sometimes than the main characters. I mean, I've been a big fan of Galomulus since, you know, I first saw him, and he's just an interesting character for just being a orange, you know, blob.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I can't think of too many runs that have had so many new characters that have stuck. You know, you see a lot of new characters introduced and they kind of fade away, but this run that Jeff Johns has had since Rebirth, we've seen so many new characters like Glomulus and Larfleeze and Atrocitus that were created that are now part of the fabric of the DC universe, and you really can't think of the universe being around without those characters in it, because they've made such an impression.
Sornik is one of my favorite Lanterns. Like, this is this brand new character that was created. You know, it turns out that it was Sinestro's daughter. We didn't know that at first. But, you know, to have that character taken on, for me, there's like an emotional resonance there. I loved her relationship with Kyle. She's one of those characters that, and I was pleasantly surprised to see her appear again in the run after this. She's a character that I've been really worried that was going to somehow get lost in the shuffle, and I'm glad to see that the new creative teams are embracing the sheer wealth of well-developed characters that are in this, because I think for each one of us, there are probably characters that if we were to sit down and just talk about the characters alone, we would be pulling out so many of them that are, and I think there would be different lists of the ones that we connected to the most. And that's something that I think is cool about a series, when you can do that.
Definitely.
Atrocitus shows up, and there's another character who, wow, have I gotten to really enjoy his story, especially in the latter part of the Red Lantern's run. I think it's gotten very interesting when in like the Zero issue and everything, we started to see more of his background, and to get to know a little bit more of what path he went on to become the Atrocitus we know now. I won't even say we know and love, but the Atrocitus we know now. That to see him go on this journey where he'd kind of come to terms with his rage, but yet to find it reignited again. And to show up to this point where he's facing the First Lantern again because of what the First Lantern did, the choice that the First Lantern had him make. You know, you have an opportunity to like bring about salvation or to destroy it all. And he had to face that choice, and now he's coming back enraged. How do you make that monumental decision that he did and live with yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, Atrocitus is a very complex character, and it's hard to figure out how you're gonna as a writer, how you bring him in and give him the resolution he needs, and then what happens after that. And it'll be interesting to see how Atrocitus is going forward now that he has gotten his revenge, and how does that change him? Because that was what was his driving force. And we've kind of seen that transition a little bit in Red Lanterns near the end, where he's gone from being solely focused on his own rage to suddenly being perhaps a little more empathetic to the rage in the universe about people who are treated poorly. And I think that'll be an interesting thing, because the Red Lanterns have the propensity to be very much like the Green Lanterns, but their methods are so completely different.
I also see it in that, you know, rage is such a strong emotion to have, but it's something that, for them to be able to keep their power, they have to hold on to the rage. So it will be interesting to see now that his reason for rage is almost, I guess, at an end, what he'll do going forward. But I've always liked it as a character, and I thought the way he was using here was really good.
I liked the bringing in of all the different corps and having them, obviously everybody except for Sinestro's corps, have them all like bring their powers together, and using Jon Stewart's military background and Mogo to make this like beam that like of just really channeling everything they all had at the First Lantern. I thought it was a really cool gambit. It was cool to see them, because we've seen in so many stories where when these lanterns all finally came together and they were able to coexist, they're able to do great and amazing things against large, powerful, great adversaries. We saw that in things like Blackest Night and stuff like that too. But it's been something that's a staple of this series. Like, when they can put aside their differences and just come together for that one purpose, big things happen. I liked here that it wasn't enough. It really set the stage for, we've had this cerebral villain who now we're starting to see, wow, they're throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, the neighbor's kitchen sink, a washer and dryer, right at this guy, and like nothing is fazing him. He's finding a way to keep on continuing. And that's something that I thought was really great, especially because there's nothing cooler than that all will be well, where you've got Mogo there. I mean, that was just, to me, I didn't realize how much I missed Mogo until you see that moment, and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool.
And then to find out it wasn't enough,
Yeah, I thought that, the page itself, when you see Mogo just channeling all the different emotional spectrum powers, is really, really cool. But for me, one of the coolest part is to see the return of Nort. I thought that was great. I made fun of the character as much as anyone else did in the 90s, but when I saw that big emerald dog helping out Guy, and then you see Nort there, I probably hooped and hollered a little bit too. That would probably as Jim would say, a hoorah moment. So it was good. I liked it, but I did like the whole aspect of all of the lanterns coming together, and yet still not having enough. At that point, the first time I read it, I was like, well, what is it going to take to get this guy down?
I like that Sinestro shows up right at that moment, like taking full advantage of what would be, I guess, a perceived weakened state. And he comes in with all of it, just all of the fear, his anger, every emotion that's been built up inside him. And you see him just showing again why he is who he is. But again, so easily, like that part of him is ripped out by the First Lantern, where he just says, it just means nothing now because your Korugar's dead. And, just hitting him again with the things, and that's the power of the First Lantern. There's a creep factor to him. And it was funny how I kind of focused on him one way in my initial reads, but it was funny, in my last read with him, I got a lot more creeped out by him, by his need to take that one pivotal moment and just manipulate it and use it to destroy you. I think as people, as humans, it's very normal for major traumatic events to happen in our lives without the need for this kind of thing to be something that we all get fixated on, where it's something that changes us. Those can be extreme positives, extreme negatives, or somewhere in the middle, but we all kind of become absorbed in those moments, and they shape our lives. Here, you got a man who's doing that and manipulating that, magnifying that, making it worse. It's something that we all can connect with and notice the power of on our own. Imagine if somebody else was able to control that, though, and channel that, what they could do to you. And we're seeing that here in the power of these moments. And I thought that was really great, especially with Sinestro, who we're used to being a character who has this strong need for control. And to have it taken from him was just, I thought, to me, pretty breathtaking.
Yeah, he's really a sadistic character. He's very twisted.
Yeah, although I would say that just his visual look is kind of creepy. He looks, you can see his insides and everything like that, and just different emotional colored spectrums, but he it's one of the things that made him a very interesting character that was very interesting, cool to see, in that you get someone who takes that one moment where your life changes, whether it be for the good or the bad, and he plays with it, and that moment makes him more powerful, makes for an interesting character.
I love when Hal showed up. It was one of those moments where, like, there's a build to a certain thing, and when you see that moment, Black Lantern's Volthoom is yours. I loved his Black Lantern outfit in this one because I've really grown to love. I know it's only a slight twist, but I've loved the newer version of his costume, and to see it kind of in Black Lantern form, there's something about that just, I was like geeking out just completely when this whole sequence came in. It was really cool to see this play out.
And it's a great spread.
Yeah, absolutely. Carol's reaction was kind of like mine.
Yeah, it's really great. And is it me, or is there like some dead lanterns in here as well that you see? Because I'm looking at it looks like some uniforms like of deceased Green Lanterns, like on the top.
You're talking about the green in the background?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? It's hard to tell because they start having those Black Lantern symbols. But I think you're right. It looks like there's potential to be there. But boy, I mean, he's bringing the creepiest of the creepy with him.
There's one guy that looks like from the mask. It looks like the DC's version of Ares with the sword.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's a great page.
And it goes back to the prophecy that Black Hand saw, where Hal Jordan will be the greatest Black Lantern.
And I think you can see that is from the fact that he was able to will the ring to him, and the fact that he was able to contact Indigo One with the Black Ring to bring him to the fight. I mean, I think you're seeing Hal do things with the Black Ring that I don't think anyone else was able to do.
Yeah, well, commanding Necron,
Definitely. I mean, and it just, he definitely uses the ring in ways that I don't think we've seen before, which makes it for a very interesting battle.
When he starts to manipulate Hal, and he goes back to that moment of Hal's childhood, there's something to me about the willingness of Volthoom to mess with the memories of a child. Because in that moment, I'm sorry, he's messing with, little boy Hal. He's not messing with, the Hal Jordan that we know and love. To be able to be that sadistic and driven, that you would do something like that. To me, I think there's certain villains that have a code and a line, and I always liked that distinction between them and a villain like Volthoom, who just really, you get to this point where you're like, wow, any part of me that might early on have had any sympathy for him is gone now. Because early on when you hear his story, it's very tragic, and you blame the Guardians, and you can't help but feel some sympathy to Volthoom, to what he had gone through. And I really like that by this moment, he has done so much, committed so many atrocities in messing with people. What he was doing now to Hal, and knowing that like he was doing these things with the intention of making them permanent, he went back and messed with him as a child. I mean, there's something to me about that. That's my line, where I'm like, okay, this guy has no redeeming qualities now.
And, but from his point of view, he sees it in a completely different way, and that's what makes him the perfect villain. In the same way as, Sinestro, he sees himself as the good guy, and and his way is the right way. And if it means messing with a young Hal Jordan, that's what he's going to do, and that's what makes it even more intriguing. It makes it even more, vile.
I love the panel where you see Hal reacting to Volthoom asking young Hal if he wants his father back, and you see the tears in Hal's eyes because that's probably what he himself would like to have, and it just breaks his heart to see his younger self go through that.
When Sinestro jumps to the power battery, I love the way that he calls out Parallax. I know you're in there, and I demand that you heed my will. I mean, to go to Will, this is a guy who we've seen issue after issue lately of him showing why he is one of the finest Green Lanterns. He owned it. He was showing tricks that like we didn't know existed, and I'm sure he's got a lot more in his, lunch pail. But to see him kind of dually use both when he's controlling fear, I really like that. It just adds a little extra edge to him. It's stuff we see with characters like Guy Gardner, who's been able to, in some ways, channel the rage while he's channeling the green. And there's something about that I've just really enjoyed, how some characters are able to be touched by both emotions, because they're very strong in more than one emotion, and you can see them flipping between core. Fatality was a great example earlier when Jamie was taking us through kind of her history. She's been a little bit of everything as well. And there's something about that just kind of works for me. When we see Sinestro in this moment, this was very iconic for me. Just when he took control of Parallax, we got to see that I now control Parallax visual. To me, that was really stunning.
And have we ever seen anyone like control Parallax in the way that Sinestro seems to? I mean, first of all, I love the Parallax costume that Sinestro has, but I don't think anyone's actually controlled him in the way Sinestro does.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jamie. I don't think anybody's ever controlled Parallax, and just the guts to do that, and it mimics what happens with Hal. Again, they're very similar. What they're doing parallels each other, but yet they're still very opposite of each other. That he just calls out Parallax, and he's not afraid to do it. That's the brilliant thing, is he knows he's going to be able to control Parallax, and there's not even an opportunity for Parallax to dominate him.
Why is it when somebody tries to show that they are like super powerful, more powerful than you, they've got to go excessively huge? I would love it. Wouldn't it have been funny if the first liner just said, "I am a god and I can get so tiny." You'll never see where I'm at. I just was laughing at that. I'm like, this is what happens with everybody with godlike power. They hit a point where they have to get huge. It's just like one of those things. And they've got to say, I am a god. See how big I am. If I ever get godlike power, I am going to become as tiny as possible.
Well, if they don't say that, then no one will ever know. They have to tell people that, Otherwise, who knows?
I'm a god. It's a very strange god.
You had to be up right up to the tee part.
Well, what else are you gonna do when you're that tiny? I mean, I don't know. Bow before me, they're not going to be able to see me, so it's kind of they're just going to have to be weirdly creeped out. I don't know what else to say. One of the things that I did love about with Parallax being brought in, you wanted to start seeing some of the big elements of the mythos that have been added. The mythos word's been thrown out by the three of us, just how much of the background and that Johns has played with. Necron. I so wanted to see Necron. It's funny how, I don't know what your guys' experience was with the first issue. First time reading this issue, I should say. There was a lot of it, I didn't know where it was going to go. I knew Hal was going to die and he was going to come out as a Black Lantern. I guess I didn't expect him to come out bringing Necron. I thought that was so great. The moment with his dad, that connection, and, the dad kind of sitting there and giving him a nod and a pat on the back and saying, I know what you're here for. Go do it. Do your thing. Especially with what the first Lantern, Volthoom, had played with in his childhood with bringing Dad back. How Dad was showing him, hey, this is who I am, Hal. This is who you are. This is that connection that we had. And this is that thing that you need to live up to. Go do what we do. Be a Jordan. I loved that moment. I just geeked out there. It was a great father-son moment. It was a really quick thing. And sometimes those are the sweetest. When you don't go too crazy on your exposition, you just give it that really cool, sweet moment that plays into what we saw before and sets up for bring on Necron. I loved that whole layout.
For me, I didn't know what to expect reading from this because you knew this was going to be a final a big conclusion issue for something that's been going on for almost 10 years, but to see that Hal being able to see his father, this was something that I was hoping we would get a glance at back at Blackest Night, because I remember when the Dead Were Going to Rise, I had a whole list in my head of people I wanted to see confront people who had passed away, but to see it here was such a better payoff than what's seen in Blackest Night, and this was actually kind of emotional for me. I kind of like this because you've known for so long that Hal had this moment that he felt fear when his father's plane crashed, and then to get this moment in this issue was really great, and then to see the full page with Hal having Necron rise, it was amazing. The page itself is gorgeous. There's so many of these full page spreads or full pages that are just, they can be like posters.
Yeah, the whole thing with Hal and his dad, I remember when Blackest Night came out, I was a little disappointed that Hal didn't get to encounter his father at all. And now seeing it in its entirety, I'm glad it was held on to until this moment, because it has so much more weight, because this is the bookend of Jeff Johns' run, and this is a part of Hal's history which has not only defined him, but it's plagued him throughout his entire life. And for him to be able to have that moment with his dad when he probably needs it the most, I just thought was a masterstroke.
I like that it turned into this bit where we also got to see Sinestro's use of willpower in a different way. Well, we know that Hal is, the other side of that coin. Those two they're almost like brothers in the way that they are able to overcome and use that will. So to see him here pulling the same strings with Necron, and just the way that the two of them, in many ways, he kind of built off of what Sinestro had already put in place. Sinestro built off of what the other Lanterns had put in place. I loved how this wound up being this unplanned, multi-phased attack of everybody, because the fact they were all together and they were all coming together, and we're seeing this constant barrage on this first Lantern where they're hitting him with everything. And I really feel that the reason why they were able to defeat him was not because of one single moment. It was because of the build to the end result that allowed Hal and Necron to take away that control of the emotion that the first Lantern had. And we see him in the end just being human, and Necron being able to take him out. I just thought I just loved the build. There was something special about that.
Yeah, I mean, you needed every other portion of events that happened prior to get to that point. You needed all the Lanterns to come together and focus their power on through Mogo, and you needed the Sinestro scenes and all this other stuff to get him to a point where Hal and Sinestro were able to do what they could do, and then ultimately defeat both of them.
I like how that. I didn't know what was going to happen with Hal. I saw it somebody was going to have to help bring Hal back or something, if that was what was going to happen there. I was very worried about him. I loved that, the end result was, it was almost like the Guardians and the Ring knew to seek him out and to bring him back. It was such a peaceful, kind of closure where, he's kind of embracing himself, taking back in who he is, his whole past, the pain that he went through with his dad and everything like that. Just being able to kind of come to terms with that and kind of become stronger afterwards. I love that once again his Ring embraced him, and we got to see the Green Hal as Green Lantern standing tall. That just was another one of those. It was been mentioned so many times, the great spreads, but welcome to the Green Lantern Corps, and amen. Take a hike back to your tomb, Necron. How cool was that? It to me, it was great.
It was really cool. I liked. I don't know. I'm still even after I've read it a number of times, I'm still looking at that sequence, and I look at young Hal and how he's very, very white. There's all that white energy coming off of him, and there was that comment that he had the spark of creation in him. And I'm wondering if it's the merging of the young Hal and the Black Lantern Hal that helps bring him back, and then the Ring comes in and solidifies it.
Well,
I just thought visually it was just stunning.
look at the symbol on Hal's chest during all that.
Yeah.
He actually has, like you're saying, the White Lantern symbol. So it really is something where that power of the light, kind of is acting as an antithesis. And I think your point's well met there. That was kind of, just all of that energy coming back into him. I thought that was cool.
You also see the Green Lantern symbol in there as well.
And,
yeah, so I like that too. And correct me if I'm wrong, but is the ring that Hal gets, is that Volthoom's ring?
I got the impression that Volthoom's ring was disappeared. I think it went with Volthoom, and I think that's where Power Ring is going to come from. At least that's how I read it.
Well, it actually says right here, Volthoom has been eradicated and his corrupted ring banished back to his universe.
Oh, yeah.
While another ring searches for our savior. So they actually do identify right there that what happens to Volthoom's ring, but also that this ring is in fact a different ring. It's not Volthoom's.
Okay, yeah. So I'm mistaken that because for some reason I thought it was his but I guess I was wrong.
My question is this the ring that Sinestro had that crumbled in the beginning of the issue, or is this just another ring?
I'm assuming it's another ring because I think the ring. I think it was more symbolic that when Sinestro abandoned Will to go back to Fear, I feel like the broken ring was for like his time with the Green Lantern at that point was dead, like that ring was.
I'm trying to remember. I don't know why, because I kind of wondered if it wasn't that ring too, but I can understand what you're saying. I thought I saw that ring, and this could be me imagining it in my head, because you see that ring crumble. Mm-hmm. And then do we see that ring again anywhere? I'm just looking through the pages to see if we see that ring afterwards.
I don't think we do. Yeah, I think Jamie's right. I don't think you see it again.
Although it does look like the ring that Hal eventually gets.
Yeah, so that's a hard. I can totally see the question. Like I don't know. I don't really have an answer on that. I'm just looking through all the pages to see. Hey, did I miss something here? But I don't think we see that ring show up again. I mean, that could very well be meant to be the same ring, but we certainly don't see it, I don't think, reconstituted anywhere to know if that's... yeah.
But it could be his ring.
With the nature of the rings, I wouldn't be disappointed to find out that was the same ring, just bringing itself back together. I do love the Hal and Carol moments. It's, to see those two embrace afterwards, Highball and Sapphire, and... just kind of that conclusion and that coming together, and knowing that that's not going to be it. The Sinestro Corps has shown up.
Yeah, just when you think it's over. When I first read this issue, I read it digitally because I couldn't wait to get out of work and go to the comic shop, and I bought it and read it during lunchtime. And I thought we were near the end, and then it was like all of a sudden the ground shakes and up pops the Sinestro Corps. I'm like, oh, this isn't over. This isn't even close to being over.
I almost forgotten about them. I mean, to be honest with you, but I almost forgotten about them because it's been so long since we've seen other Sinestro Corps members other than Arkillo. And, to have them all suddenly come back, I'm like, oh, I forgot about them. We got round 2 coming along.
And you know what? It makes perfect sense because as readers, we were so focused on Sinestro being the representative of that why would we be thinking that this would be leading to the Corps showing up? But I loved that because it felt like the story was done. Curveball, and it's Sinestro going after the Guardians. And I totally, at this point, I can get Sinestro's motivation with everything they've done. With all the manipulation, with what he saw behind the scenes. He's like, how can we give them a pass now? I really liked his philosophy there. I'm not saying that I agree with what he was going to do, but I get why he's angered and enraged and saying, hey, we can't let them continue. Look what they've done. They made the Manhunters. They made the Third Army. They are behind all of this stuff. That was something that just really... That emotion when he's looking at Hal, it's their fault that Korugar is gone. I have nothing left. They deserve to die for what they did. The tear in his eye, the emotion, that's that complex complication. You see that anger and rage, but then you see an intense sadness. There's something powerful in that moment with that character that I just, woo.
I love the 2-page spread in where you have Sinestro and Hal fighting. But, yeah, you can totally see his point of view in all of this. You know, he was a he had, for all his life, he wanted to protect one thing. His whole reason for doing everything was for the protection of Korrigar, and to see that gone, to see his reason for everything to be gone, I mean, you feel like you have nothing left. I mean, you want to take revenge on those that took it for you, and you know, you can almost see justifiable reasons for him wanting to kill the Guardians.
Yeah, the weight of the moment when he's standing there and the tears coming down, he knows that he's crossed the line and there is no more going back. And as you said, Sean, you know, he's vindicated in that he's done the one thing he felt he had to do, but the weight of the moment is just overwhelming. And to see Sinestro at that point with the tear there is just – it's one of the most powerful moments of the entire issue.
And for him, it was giving up the legacy. He always saw himself as being the greatest of the Green Lanterns.
Yeah.
And in that moment, with that act, he can no longer be that. In his mind, he has totally lost everything, including that. He's given up that will that he's had, that order that he's always seen. This is no longer about that. It was, you know, complete loss of control, except, and you know, there's that part with, it was so, like, I was, like, sitting there saying, no, not Ganthet 2. Come on. We wanted to see the redemption of Ganthet. I remember reading this for the first time and seeing that moment. I'm like, no, come on, not him. Like, even with everything that happened, even with the hand down his throat, I still believe that he can be rescued. I'm on Team Kyle with this one, you know, like, I want to see that I loved how they toyed with our emotions there as readers, because I'm sure you guys, knowing the fans you are of Green Lantern, that's a character that's very special to me, and the redemption of him was something I so wanted from this, and I was glad to see the path that it went down.
For me, I remember going back to, you know, the Ganthet's tale, and I remember for this whole story waiting for something to happen. I thought we were going to get it when in the story where Kyle fights Ganthet one-on-one, and I was like, okay, at some point he's going to make him remember. At some point he's going to make him remember. And then getting to this 2-page here, you know, in the panels where you see the death of the Guardians, I'm reading it with my eyes like bulging out. I can't believe it's happening. And then you see Ganthet just like doesn't have the will or the fight anymore. You have the single tear coming out of his eye. For the first time reading this, I was really genuinely shocked, and yeah, it was a moment where I didn't think you'd actually see.
If you look at that though, and jump back to when Sinestro is lashing out at Hal, and he says, "I have nothing left," his narrative mirrors Ganthet's in that moment.
Yes,
and
it does.
It so totally sets up brilliantly why Sinestro spared him. And I might as well just say that he did that, because when you do a reread of this and you see the way that played out, it's like, oh my gosh, is that, like, writing that sequence and saying, like, we're going to set up with what Sinestro says here, the connection to what Ganthet says here. And you see in the moment, even the change in demeanor on Sinestro's face, you know, when it says it had to come to an end, Jordan, you just kind of tell right there, this is where I had my second thoughts. This is where I'm connecting with this guy. How can I do this to him? It was just, wow. Just a very, very powerful moment. And I'm with you, Jamie, I think you mentioned earlier how cool the Parallax outfit looks on Sinestro. I would be fine if he releases Parallax and just keeps wearing this because it looks cool.
Oh, yeah. You know, it's funny, throughout this whole story, I kept trying to tell myself that, you know, okay, the Guardians, it really can't be the Guardians. Somebody's got to be controlling them. Something is manipulating them in some way. They really can't be going bad. And all the way through this issue, I'm waiting for something to happen to vindicate them. And we get to the end, and I'm like, oh no. And I had to put the book down when I got to this page. I had a real hard time reading it, because, you know, those Guardians have been very much like father figures for a long time for the Green Lantern universe and for fans. They've been kind of, recently they're the bad guys, but they were pretty much beloved before, and now you get to this point and you're finding that, they're all gone. And like you, Sean, I was like, God, please not Ganthet. Please not Ganthet.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I felt. I mean, from my reading experience, I've been reading Guardians far as back as I can remember, and you had the occasional bad Guardian like Ali Apsa, in where he went crazy, but they were always synonymous with the Green Lantern Corps, and so when you get to that page, and I'm like, oh, they're really doing it. I was just like, oh no, you can't do that. And as to see that 2 pages with panels with Ganthet, I was like, oh, not him too. And it was a game changing moment as far as I'm concerned.
The moment with the question between the two of them, were we ever truly friends? That's the tragedy of all this, Jordan. Hal. And you never see him call him Hal.
Yeah, oh, never.
We'll always be friends. And that is the tragedy of it, because what he's saying is, we're probably doomed and destined to wind up in these pitched battles between the two of us, because they are two sides of the coin. But the respect is there, and to a certain level, the admiration for accomplishments and what they've done. And yet there's pivotal, like there are between brothers, a lot of times, philosophical differences that can separate them and make a huge rift there that just keeps creeping in no matter what you do. And I just really, the whole Hal and Sinestro story that they have laid out here, when Sinestro had the ring back and Hal was traveling with them straight on through to here, I thought was really just an amazing journey that I think helped us to get to know both characters in ways that were evolutionary of the characters, evolutionary of our understanding, made them feel more human, added more to their relationship. When comic creators and writers in general are able to make their characters three-dimensional to where they have all of these different facets about them, there's something that makes moments like this much more powerful. There's so many things that have happened in this issue right up to this moment that where we got to see these characters go through so many things that, because we know them and we have a relationship with them because they feel real, they're much more powerful than if they were just flat characters without that kind of depth. And that's the strength.
Definitely. And the look on Hal's face when Sinestro says we'll always be friends is just perfect. Because you can see the regret.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, when we get to that point, I mean, there were so many moments in this issue overall that, got to you, got to me, and this was definitely one of them. Because I'm looking at this page, and I'm thinking back to all the previous encounters they've had with each other. And I could even go as far back as the Emerald Dawn 2. And it shows that they're adversaries in a way that is unique compared to other hero villains, because they're adversaries, but they're also friends. And so it adds a bit of complications to all of it, and it adds more dimension to it, because they started out as friends and then became enemies, but they always respected each other for it, for what they could do, and it makes for a very unique, confrontations with each other, and why I've always liked the confrontations between these two.
We take a look at the Book of Oa at the end, and I like that idea, because I've always looked at the Book of Oa when it has anything to the future in it, that future can be changed. There is a possibility to do that. But I like how Sinestro pages ahead for Lantern Snow and says, you wanted to know how their story went in the future, how they lived, how they felt. Well, and I don't know, does this take place I guess for Lantern Snow, this stuff has already happened. So, seeing Guy at the bar and, back to the Warrior reference, seeing Jon Stewart become a representative, in the Senate, seeing Baz and Kyle, I mean, Larfleeze, all of, Atrocitus, all these great characters. and just giving them kind of a positive history. It was a neat way to showcase, hey, we've worked with these characters, and if we could do a Green Lantern the end, this is what we'd do. This is the way we'd show you how their future life went. And, right to the iconic Hal and Carol get married and have a kid, with where you see Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman right around it. That kind of stuff I geek out over, because I've mentioned on the show many times, I grew up loving the concept of Earth 2, where you got to see the characters grow old, to have families and things like that. And it's something, being able to see that here, it's something that I don't think DC should ignore, the opportunity to show, like, even in the old universe, to be able to somehow, or however they would want to do it, to be able to show at some point a world where we can see some of these characters having had a life beyond what we know them to have. Because you want to keep them obviously a certain age where they're accessible as being like they're a very with it today, modern. They're not at the end of their cycle. They are like heavy in their prime, because we want to see them in their prime. But I would love to read a world where you get to see what happens with little Martin Jordan. I want to see that kid have a life. What will happen to him? Will he become a hero? Will he just be some normal kid? I don't know. I want to know. I'm interested in that. And that's where, when you build a caring of characters, this is where the multiverse kind of works for them. I would read in an instant, a miniseries showing this world. I would love to see what that looks like.
I would love to see it, even if it was as a miniseries, but just to go over all of the different things. I'd love seeing Guy as this, hanging out at a bar, and then you get the nod back to Bowfunga, going back to old, Green Lantern stories, and then the One Punch. It was really, I chuckled at that. I thought it was a lot of fun to just see nods going back to that, and then with John, I thought it was interesting that you get not one green streak, but for looks like him using a ring, but you get two green streaks, looking like maybe Fatality isn't always destined to be a Star Sapphire, which I thought was kind of neat. And then you have Kyle, which I think I remember from your podcast, Myron, saying that he looks like you should get a haircut or something.
Oh, we call them Space Jesus.
Space Jesus.
I love the glommies by his side there.
Yes, I do like that though. And then I'm curious as to you got you got Simon here. Looks like he's about to help out a new Green Lantern who is female. Who, I mean, we've seen in alternate storylines. I think there was a Carrie Wren that was in I think the third series with Kyle, but we've never really seen a female Green Lantern, so that's kind of interesting as well. And then you have, I know you have Larfleeze here, who I'm hoping this is what I think it is. Do you guys think? Yes.
Yeah.
That was, I'm reading and I'm like, oh, I like it. I thought it was kind of cool.
Now, here's my question with the Jessica Cruz. Do you guys think we're going to get her?
I think so. I think this was Jeff Johns kind of pointing out some of the things that he's going to be planning and doing with the upcoming Trinity War and what goes on afterwards. Especially when they talk about the Justice League dying, kind of alludes to the Villains Month that's coming up. So I kind of think we're going to see her at some point. I don't know how close, but I think we will see her.
I'm hoping we do. I mean, it would be interesting to see this character. I mean, and because you don't see things like this. Jeff doesn't usually put stuff in here like this without having some sort of plan and having this character where Simon still looks the same. I mean, he looks sort of like he does now. So I don't know how far in the future he is when you see this compared to the other characters. So this could be a lot sooner than some of the other ones that we see. And I'd be totally for that.
I kind of wonder if, because we know Hal is what his new role is going to be. So he's not going to be patrolling Sector 2814, and neither is John, and neither is Guy, and neither is Kyle. Is Jessica Cruz going to be Simon Baz's sector partner?
That could be interesting. I mean, I definitely would like to see that. And then I guess would we see that in the Justice League of America?
I don't know.
Yeah, I would assume if we were going to see it at all, that would be where.
That would be where we see it because, I think, I believe Jeff is going to be continuing to reign Simon in that book. So, add another Green Lantern character, and you can see them, protecting the sector while being on the team.
Or will we see that character on the Justice League?
Oh, interesting.
That's very possible. Yeah,
they do need a Green Lantern.
Which would be, depending on how well they get along. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what ends up happening. As much as I loved the reveal of Sinestro, because I geeked out over that, the reveal about Ganthet and Sade and what they did there, for me, that was my emotional moment of the whole thing. Like, I did not see this story going here. And when it did, I'm like, thank you. I really felt like this whole issue was a love letter to the fans who have been reading all along, saying, I know who you care about because I care about them too. And I want to give you this moment because I need it too. I want these two to have that smile moment, that moment where you're just kind of like, and I loved how, Sinestro just said, look, you got to understand, here's the deal. I saved you because I know what it's like to lose everything, but you have to leave. Nobody can know. Because what I did has to stand. So in order to do this, the two of you are going to leave. You're going to start a life on your own. You're going to live that life, and you're going to enjoy that life. But you're going to live that life, you're going to enjoy that life, and nobody else knows about it. I just loved how that played out. I got it in that moment. I get what Sinestro was doing. It again goes back to that Sinestro is not what he seems. There's always like things where he's going to surprise you because you never know what's going to trigger him because of how complex he is. I loved his handling of Lara Flees with the whole secret. Hey, here's what you get. You get a secret nobody else knows, that they survived. And you are the only one that has that. Like, it's just it just shows how brilliant he is. And I love villains that are smart. It's powerful, smart. He's able to be the scariest and most brilliant character at the same time. And those are characters that are deeply and richly interesting. And this is one where anybody who sits there and it's just a comic book, read this issue. This is not just anything. This is just plain awesome when you see those moments. Anybody who can take you through so many emotions I know this was oversized and all that, but talk about a span where he was able to take you on an absolute roller coaster journey of, like, what didn't you experience in this issue? Like, I mean, everything was here. Everything.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. There was this page and panel here with the reveal with Ganthet and Sight was probably one of my more favorite moments of the issue, and it shows something that, like, a lot of other villains may not have, is he has that ability to show compassion as well, but it's something that he doesn't show everyone or anyone at all. And the fact that he was able to play on Larflee's need to have something that no one else has. Well, this is the greatest secret you can have, and it's his alone. And so that was definitely smart on Sinestro's part, and it definitely is fan service, and I think the greatest aspect that you can have it, because they are still alive and the fans know that they're still alive, but they're not on the playing board anymore. And honestly, I'd love to see this like a miniseries, just to see what they're doing in their own lives, but hidden from everyone else. Like, what do they do? That now that they're no longer have to be guardians, but they can't be part of the universe anymore.
It also leaves open the opportunity, though, which I do find richly interesting, to bring back those two if they need to. Like, you can totally, if we never see him again, or if we see him in a miniseries or something like that, I would love to see that. But in doing this, it was cool in a way that he said, okay, we're going to wipe out all these other ones, but we're going to give you the two that you guys all know would have fought against this. And, that leaves a door open. If a writer down the road says, hey, I would like them back, they're there. Yet, you don't have to wipe out the event that, that horrible death of all the other Guardians. You don't have to wipe that out. That actually can still stay in play. And you can bring them back with these new Guardians, if you want to.
Absolutely, yeah.
I love that.
And it's a great ending for the two of them. They have each other. They thought they lost each other, and now they can live their lives in seclusion. But you're right. If given a good enough story and a reason, they can always be brought back, which would be cool. And it would be a really cool moment to see Kyle, seeing Ganthet again, and if it would have happened down the line. But this was a great way to sort of end their story on an uplifting note.
Yeah, we had a really interesting conversation on the Blog of OA has a Facebook group, and there was a lot of conversation when this issue came out because it was such a perfect ending that there were people considering stop reading the series because it was such a perfect ending. If there was never another Green Lantern book printed, they'd be happy because of the way it ended. Did either of you guys, did that notion even cross your minds when you read this?
Not in this first second, because there's so much to be satisfied with this issue, but there's so much that going forward, it leaves it so much, so many, interesting ways that you can go forward. And so, I think like you, Myron, I've been reading Green Lantern since the late 70s. So I've seen a lot of different, creators do interesting things with the franchise. So to see this, storyline kind of ended it this way, and I'm just curious to see what comes next.
Now, question, when you guys mentioned your, this would be kind of fun for our listeners. I know, Myron, we've talked about this on the show before, but I think for anybody, maybe this is their first time hearing from both of you. You guys mentioned your history with Green Lantern. Have you guys consistently read Green Lantern since, the late 70s? Or, have you, like we all go through as comic fans, have budget issues played into that from time to time? What has been your history, and how long have you had a readership of the Green Lantern? Do you remember where it started for you, and how long have you been there?
Well, for me, I started reading comics through my uncle's collection, and I remember he had a bunch of adventure comics, detective, and a bunch of other ones. But one of the ones I always went back to and read was Green Lantern number 10, which had the cover of Hal Jordan on his hands and knees, and he's about to fade away, and Barry Allen Flash is about, needs to charge his ring up. And I always liked that issue a lot. And I started reading Green Lantern again in the late 70s. My first issue that I bought myself was it was toward the tail end of the Green Lantern Green Arrow series. It was number 93, which has Hal Jordan and Sinestro fighting each other with their rings with Green Arrow laid out on the ground. I think through all of the things, I read Marvel, I read DC, I read some independent, and I read a variety of DC stuff. I think of all the things that I've come and gone, I've always really stuck with Green Lantern because it's superheroes and it's sci-fi, and it's two things I've always been interested in. And with Hal Jordan, he was my favorite character in comics, probably almost in fictional writing. I've always liked him because to me he seemed like DC's version of Captain Kirk. He's that courageous hero who acts first, maybe thinks a little bit afterwards. Always ready to throw some punches and get the girl, and he was the man of action to me. And I've always liked Captain Kirk, and to see this character kind of have that sort of characteristics has always been interesting to me. So I've always stuck with the character in the franchise.
Myron?
Well, for me, Green Lantern, is particularly Hal Jordan in particular, has always been a very personal character for me. I was born with a very rare birth defect, and I was very sickly as a child from all the surgeries that I had. And I've read a lot of comics, and back in like the late 60s, early 70s, you used to be able to buy comics without their covers in bags. You buy like 5 or 6 of them for 50 cents or a quarter. And I started reading comics then, and my sister had a boyfriend who gave me all of his comics. And in there was the last issue of the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams run. It was like early 100s issue. And I read that when I kind of got hooked on the character, and I started seeking out books then. So I've been reading since like 1971, 72-ish. Straight on through. I stopped reading all comics in the 90s. I kind of got frustrated with the comics industry and some of the some of the decisions they made in the 90s really bothered me, in terms of some of the gimmickry and such to drive up the collector's market. And when they did Emerald Twilight, that was kind of the final straw for me. I was getting very upset with the comic industry as a whole at that point. And when that happened, I gave Kyle a chance, and it didn't latch on for me. And I said, well, maybe this is my time to go away. And it was funny. It was Jeff Johns' run on Justice Society that pulled me back in. And so he brought me back in with Justice Society, and I've been reading since then. So I have a gap of, maybe 7 or 8 years where I didn't read comics, but for the most part, I've been reading all my life. And for Green Lantern, I probably would not be here if it wasn't for Green Lantern. I've had a lot of health issues, and there were times when I had some near-death experiences, and what gave me the strength to get through it was knowing that, well, if Green Lantern can get out of this situation with nothing but his willpower, then maybe I can do it too. So for me, it's always been a character I've so closely identified myself with that I'm glad they did what they did and revitalized the entire mythology, and I'm here to stay. And as a matter of fact, the reason why I do the blog of Oa and the podcast of Oa is just out of my love for the character and wanting to be a good ambassador for this mythology, much like you guys do with Raging Bullets for DC Comics as a hobby.
Yeah, it's funny. My history with Green Lantern is like, I don't want sporadic's like a strong word because it makes it sound like I don't have this like vast love for the character, and I always have. Like Green Lantern, probably my biggest exposure to him was Justice League and shows like the Super Friends, and he's fascinating. You can't help but love what he can do with the ring, and just the idea that he can bring these things to life with his imagination. Just to me, I think is just super cool. It sets him apart. So after that, because of limited budgets, my mother and my stepfather used to always take us camping. We'd go to flea markets. So a lot of my exposure was older Green Lantern material that I got in flea market boxes, where, I'd be pulling out issues. So I couldn't even tell you what my first actual Green Lantern issue was, because, you would be lucky. Sometimes you'd pull out 2 or 3 of a comic, like you'd have 2 or 3 Green Lanterns, and they're from all over the place. But you would enjoy reading them because it was like a great chance. And, a lot of the stories were done in one, or if they continued, you never knew what happened. But it was just so great to, like, delve into this world to get to know the characters. I remember, though, reading, like, lengthy runs, like when Gerard Jones was on the book. Really loved what he was doing with it, and then budgetary reasons, kind of kept me from continuing on at a certain point. And I read the Emerald Dawn series, Mosaic, both of the Emerald Dawn series, Mosaic. Like you, I read a lot of it through to Emerald Twilight, Myron, and then I also I gave Kyle a chance initially, and I was enjoying it. But then it was another one, I was kind of like, okay, I'm into the book, but, I'm kind of budgetary-wise, I got to crack down. And, I just kind of jumped off at that end. Came back on in Kyle's run because, I got heavily into, there was, runs like Jeff Johns was coming on. DC started doing all these kind of cool things. And I'm like, okay, I'm interested in Kyle now. I actually I liked the crossovers that Kyle did with Connor, the Green Arrow at the time. Yeah, I thought those were really cool crossovers. It was kind of cool to see that new generation. And I really got into Kyle when he was in Justice League with Grant Morrison writing. For some reason, like what he was doing with Hal and Wally, with Kyle and Wally on that team, it sort of invigorated my interest in, where like Kyle, I wasn't really interested in him before. That kind of made me all of a sudden I'm becoming a fan of this kid.
Well, I it's interesting. With Hal, I always see him as the hero that you strive to be. You want to be courageous. You want to be able to overcome fear. And I was really upset with the way that they dealt with Hal during the Emerald Twilight, because I had just read the Green Lantern issue that tied in with the Superman, Reign of Superman, where he fights Mongol, and it was such a great issue where you see Hal, really using his will and being able to fight on, and then he just had his emotional breakdown. I was like, no. And then you get Kyle, and I think I was able to latch on to Kyle because I work in New York, and he lives in New York, and he's younger, but he's also an artist, so he's much creative. And as a graphic designer, I kind of related to him in ways that I didn't really relate to Hal, because I saw Hal as someone you wanted to strive for, whereas with Kyle, he's someone that I could be. And so I kind of related to him a little more, and I liked what they were kind of doing. To me, it seemed like a reversed Nova knockoff, because with Nova, with Richard Rider, the Marvel character, he was this guy who just randomly got this power, and he was kind of learning it on the fly. And that's sort of what you saw with Kyle back in the day when he first came around. He had no instruction manual. He had no training. He's just a guy with a ring, and he was trying to figure out how it all worked. And that interests me. So his journey to become from being a Green Lantern and having no one to help him to where he became was an interesting journey. And I quite enjoyed that.
Guys, is there anything else that you would like to say about kind of the epilogue of this story? I know we didn't really talk about the other issues that were involved, but I'd like to take a chance. I'd like to give us some time to be able to talk about some of the new material. So is there anything about any of the epilogue tie-ins or anything that you wanted to mention that maybe we didn't get a chance to get to?
Well, the only thing I wanted to mention was that this 4-page spread at the end of issue 20 is absolutely poster worthy. I mean, it's completely gorgeous with all the characters to it. I absolutely love it.
I have an oversized Starman poster. That was a collection of they had a Starman story where all of the covers through it was 9 issues. Made one big huge picture, and they turned it into a poster, and the poster's huge. Mm-hmm. Well, I would love this to be a full-blown poster that I could frame, because it would look gorgeous on the wall. I also have a Crisis poster. When they did that one of the hardcover releases, they did this huge wraparound cover that had every character, and it was George Perez. And ended up getting that poster, and the poster actually is so detailed with so many characters. It has with it a key, who everybody is, so that way what Earth they were from and things like that. And it's absolutely stunning. This is one of those that I would make and take down things from my wall to be able to find room to put something this large on it. Because there's few I love posters, I love comic book art, and I have a lot of it, and I like the variety of it in my office. But something like this would be such a stunning piece to have that I'm with you. I would love to see this. You're right, it's poster worthy. That's the only way to say it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where you make room.
Do more posters like that. I know they did for Rise of the Third Army. They took the 4 covers and released it as a poster for the comic book stores, but they didn't release it for fans. But yeah, you're right. This would be a great piece to put on your wall.
Why do you think that is? Because I've noticed there's been a decline in, or at least my perception. I don't know if you guys have the same perception. I have a perception there's a decline in the amount of posters that we're getting. Do you guys see it that way? And if so, why do you think that there is? Obviously, if not,
I would say probably from a cost perspective. But I mean, I also every now and then I'll go to a local comic shop, and they'll have posters of recent covers, and so I guess it really does depend on the demand of it. I mean, if people want it, I'm sure they can make it, but I don't know if the demand is there, and I'm really surprised that it isn't, if that's the reason, because something like this would be amazing to have framed on a wall, and just the detail and all the characters that you have on there, it baffles me sometimes.
I wish they would do a print-on-demand service.
That would be cool.
Where you, like, as a fan, could go to a site, a DC site, or any comic company, and find a way for indies to have this same access. Because I would love to see comic companies and comic creators make money off of just fantastic artwork like this. Because I think that would be really great. Like, there's a lot of indie books, take it out of just DC. A lot of indie books right now where I'm loving the art style because it's unique. It's not mainstream. So there's a lot of that stuff where I'm like, wow, if they had a poster for this and a print-on-demand service where you could legally do something like this and be able to publish it and put it on your wall, I would love stuff like that. I think that's really neat, and it would be a great way to maybe cut some of that cost overhead that you're mentioning. You don't have to print out 7 gazillion posters. You let people decide on what posters they want, and if it's something oversized like this, you charge a premium, because it's a print on demand. Say, okay, based on size, this is what it would cost you. But to be able to drive that as a fan, I think would be a great service. I don't know what logistics would be as far as them doing that, but in a digital age, you can print on demand almost anything now. I'm surprised that we haven't seen comic companies take advantage of something like that.
Well, over on, as you were talking about that, I went to the DC Comics site because, the DC Collectibles store has a bunch of stuff, and they do have some posters and prints available. But you're right, they don't have a lot of they have like some classic covers and things like that, but they don't have a lot of big posters and prints that are panels like this, or the 4-page spread, or the epic covers. They've got, for example, a cover, the infamous "No Evil Shall Escape My Sight" with Green Arrow shooting an arrow through Hal's power battery. It's one of the famous Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams covers. There's a print of that on glass, and there's a bunch of those kind of prints. But yeah, I'd love to see them go back and do some more posters and things. And as you said, Sean, have a print on demand.
Yeah, because I just think that way, if you're able to do something like that, print on demand, you cut a lot of that overhead, because that's got to be, it's cost prohibitive if you're printing a ton of them. Because I like their site a lot. I actually bought I liked Man of Steel so much, I bought a Man of Steel water bottle just because I wanted another water bottle. But then I also got for my iPhone, I was like I wanted to get like a DC related iPhone case. And I got it was at the end of it. I'm like, I got that We Can Be Heroes one, just because I'm like, okay, it's going
That's
to
nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's a sharp looking case, and it's actually the cool part about these cases for anybody that's interested in getting any of these phone cases they've got. It comes with like a rubber sleeve that goes around your phone, but then there's a metal part that like covers over that. So it's like a really sturdy case, and the graphic is like I guess maybe not metal, it's hard plastic. I don't know. You get this really cool graphic, and there's so many different choices there. Like, I'm surprised they don't have more available swag-wise there. And maybe because they haven't had the site up more than a couple years, at least, where they've taken it more in-house with it. I would like to see them increase their product opportunities more, because as a fan, I love swag. And I love, like, nowadays, I think it's become cool, I think, to show off your geek cred. To a certain extent. It's a lot more acceptable, certainly, from when in the 70s when we started doing all this, where you kind of hit it more. So I love having stuff like this. And it's really high. The stuff I've gotten from them, I've gotten T-shirts from them. I've gotten, like the phone case I mentioned, water bottles, because I've got the We Can Be Heroes water bottle, too. They're high quality. I mean, like, you're getting, like, some really decent stuff for the price point. So it's not like you're getting... A lot of times there's been print-on-demand services where you feel like you're getting something cheap. And I feel like their collectibles are really, nice. While you're not killing yourself with your, wallet, you're still getting a really nice product that you're, like, not ashamed to show off to people. Or it looks like it's falling apart as you're showing it to them. It's actually functional. So I don't know. It's funny how this image turned into this great discussion on, swag that we'd all like to see. But it does come out of a love for, I agree, the ending of this. And I loved how it turned into congratulations from so many people. I ended up reading. I don't always read all of that stuff because I've got a lot of comics that I want to go on and read. This one, I enjoyed the issue so much. I read every single one of these, and then Jeff Johns' letter at the end. I just thought it was cool to have that. It was like watching the credits to a film, which I rarely do. Like, I was like sitting there going, I liked this so much that I want to read all this. I want to be involved in, like, what did people say? How did they congratulate him? What did Johns have to say at the end? I don't always read this kind of stuff, and I just thought it was worth noting that I did in this case. It mattered to me.
Yeah, I read it too, and I waited till after I finished the story, the first, and then I went back just to read the congratulations and then Jeff's letter, and to me, this felt like a Broadway show, and it's at its last performance, and then you have the director coming out for the last time and getting the round of applause and like flowers thrown and him making some sort of speech. It really felt like that because I think with Jeff being able to do this for as long as he did and making such an impact on the franchise as a whole, because we love Green Lantern, but Green Lantern wasn't the type of hero that you had. He was like, he is now that he was 15 years ago, and you wouldn't have a Green Lantern live action movie or the animated series without what Jeff did with this with the franchise that he's been doing for this long. So it felt really deserving that they were able to put these congratulations and his last his letter to the fans at the end. It felt really deserved, and I enjoyed reading it.
Myron, you asked something earlier, and I never really answered it. You asked about, when you got to the end of this. And I will say this, not just for the podcast, because if I wasn't podcasting, I would still not end here. And here's the reason why. I think there's a certain amount of class. And not every writer gets a chance to do this, but there's a certain amount of class with the way a writer is able to go off of a book that leaves a book in a place where a new writer can take over, and you feel like everything that you wanted closed up was, but the gates were left open for somebody to play with the sandbox still. This did everything that I wanted it to do to end this run, and so much more that I never expected. That satisfying, and it's so rare that a creator gets a chance to end a run, because it's rare that they get to stay on something this long that they can tie up so much of what they were doing and building. It felt like a deep ending, and I could see why people were saying, hey, I'm going to jump off at this point because this is kind of the ending I wanted, I'm done, and all that. And I get that. I can see why somebody would do that. But for me, I look at it a different way. I look at it as when somebody ends their run this classy and has a chance to do it, it gets me excited to look at the new run as just that, new, fresh. I'm not looking for the new writers to be doing anything that Jeff Johns has already done, because he just did it. And he did it so well. So, at this stage, this left me really excited for the new creative teams coming out of the book, because they really had a chance to bookend this in a way that just felt right and satisfying. And I'm not looking for other creators to do it for them. So that influences me on getting excited for the run. So for me as a reader, it actually would make me more excited for the new creative teams, because I don't feel like I'm missing something, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. It does.
And I think it if anything, this issue got me as invigorated into the franchise as I think Rebirth did. Not that I didn't like what came before, but Rebirth got me, jazzed for what was to come next in a way that, not a lot did before. And this issue, while I find very satisfying and, bookend, a great run, it leaves things in a way where I want to know what happens next.
Which I think is important, too, because we don't always get that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, to me, this felt like a combination of, whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, and yet something that, an issue that really makes me, invigorated to see what's the next group of creative team is going to do, because I'm so liking where this ended, that I want to see what happens going forward, because I think they left the creative team, all the creative teams left a lot of potential to go forward, and I think having read the issues, you get some really cool starts.
And I want to go back to something that Jamie said earlier. He talked about how this issue was so cinematic, and I think when you look at Jeff Johns' run, it's like watching a series of movies, and this is the epic conclusion to a saga. And at the end of it, you feel very satisfied because you got kind of a complete story, but at the same time, you're really ready for a sequel. Give me another movie. So I got to co-sign with what you guys are saying about how this is energizing more than, here's a time to jump off the book. This was just such an epic run, and it's something you don't see a lot in comics these days, to see a creator stay on a book this long to get to tell everything that they wanted to say. They get a complete thought out there, a complete story.
That's actually a real good analogy, because I look at it as the Spider-Man films and the Batman films that were just recently released. They did trilogies in both of those. Like the Batman one most recently, has left us in a place where I'm like, I want a relaunch. I want to see, them do Batman again, somebody else do it, and just kind of be able to do a little bit of a different take on it. I really liked Amazing Spider-Man that was just released, and I like that that's getting a sequel, because I really like that what they did was they're playing with the mythos a little bit differently than they did the last time around, and I think that's something that I'm looking forward to in Green Lantern. I'm looking for some creators to, in a little bit of a different way than they do it in film, to kind of play with the mythos in a way that, Jeff Johns and these guys laid out this wonderful thing. Now let's have some creators step to the plate and say, hey, I'm going to try to do that too. And try to really give you something that, the unexpected, things that you don't, I'm going to introduce you to new characters, new experiences. And why don't we do that? Why don't we go from here and start talking just a little bit casually about the 3 books that have been released so far?
Holy caffeine!
I want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. That information is always available on our show website, ragingbullets.com. It's available in our show notes. So please definitely make sure to get your thoughts on the show. Voicemails will be returning over the next couple of episodes, because I've got a lot of voicemails that have been saved up that go along with certain content that's coming, especially like our Man of Steel review, which we've already got recorded. Actually, speaking of the show, Jim and I have had the opportunity. There's a second part, obviously, this Green Lantern show that I mentioned at the beginning that I did with Myron Rumsey and Jamie Dunst, which is going to be coming out very soon. It's going to be less than a week, because I've got a lot of content in the bank now. We were also joined by friend of the show, Art Lyon, and Jim and I had a discussion with him about his work recently on Phantom Stranger, but we also did a second part with him focusing on Man of Steel. So we did a great review coming there. So I've actually got another 3 episodes in the can that I'm going to be releasing a little bit more frequently in about this show length. So that way it'll be a chance for you guys to get more regular content from us again. So I want to thank everyone for their patience. The end of May and beginning of the June wound up being really crazy for me because of switching jobs. And I had to clear out my classroom and things like that. So I needed this time to kind of get myself back in the groove. And it's been really a lot of fun. We also have some special behind the scenes coming up. Some of our friends of the show, listeners, have been doing these Google Hangouts, and I got to join in on one of them. And we've been talking about ways to release those in a way that you could get access to them. And we're looking at setting up something like a YouTube channel or something like that to get that content to you. More details will be coming. I will actually make a formal announcement on the next episode as far as how we're going to handle that, and how we're going to do some teases and lead-ins to those type of things. So it's kind of cool, because what's happened is some friends of our shows have started doing these Raging Bullets listener hangouts where they've been just kind of talking about DC comics in general, game systems, things like that. I got to enjoy it, and I'm going to be certainly joining in on more of them. It's a fun way to use Google Hangouts as a recording tool. So if you're not a part of our Raging Bullets group, make sure to link into there and keep an eye out for when these things are happening, because they were a lot of fun, and we wanted to come up with a way to release that content so people people who maybe couldn't be there can be a part of the discussions that come out of that. And I think it's kind of a great way for our Facebook group to kind of expand and grow. So we have a Facebook group. We have a Google Plus page. We have our RagingBullets.com site, on Twitter. These are all opportunities for you to interact with things that are coming up on the show. So I'm a big fan of social media and really appreciate the group of people that are kind of taking that in their own directions and going beyond the show. And I think that stuff is just really awesome. So I just want to appreciate everybody involved, and more news is coming on all that. Once again, sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. DCB Service is your Green Lantern pre-order source. Remember, those $2.99 books, 40% off, only $179. If you aren't taking advantage of this, please be sure to go check out their website and really take a look at whatever you're buying and look at the amazing discounts and how you can maybe expand some of the things that you want to read. Over at InStockTrades.com, remember those Before Watchmen hardcovers are there. $29.99 regularly, 50% off, only $15. Check out the amazing deals they're offering constantly over at InStockTrades.com. Remember, orders of $50 or more at InStockTrades.com leads to free shipping for you. Our next episode, as I mentioned, is going to be Green Lantern Part 2, and we'll be up in a few days.
Bye!
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Fated for love and loss and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan and what you do to me. Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they then in guard or Egyptian, working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier